yeah, we're good.
All right. We are live. I'm going to put the intro on, and we'll get going.
Sounds good to me.
All right.
I'm sharing.
Turn your mics off for the time being. So if you tip, just don't touch your mic because it's mic 3.
Okay. Well, mine doesn't turn on.
Oh, my bad. Yeah. No, you can. All right, it's cool.
Listening to Let Your Voice Be Heard.
It's a logical fallacy, and I know that, but, as always, and maybe the rest of the panel can tell you, I play a bit of the devil's advocate because I am the lone black Republican up here.
He just made a fool out of himself. I mean, you can look at Donald Trump and think he's making a fool out of himself.
Know Barack Obama, what he was like, anti-war, government...
Boy, that escalated quickly.
I got to jump into a rally to save a hospital here in Brooklyn in just a minute.
I stopped working on my dissertation the second my grandmother died. I am a blazing liberal who can have a Republican-leaning ideology to give me enough beers. I got to get you that Illuminati thesaurus. When you get that, you're going to be able to speak in the same language I can speak.
Now, a white person with a criminal record is more likely to get a job than a black person
Y'all tired? What? Y'all looking mad. Yo, Claudia, what's going on, beloved?
The point
What's going on, y'all? Y'all tired?
Come
on, like, we got in the studio, so y'all can make noise now. Stop the good morning.
For society, and you have more freedom and to make your own choices. Just in general, people who have money tend to have more access to resources to be able to use in their defense versus people that don't have money. So you see a lot of, lower, and that's really a class issue, and race does come into play. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard, right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
I got a gunshot. You want to hear the gunshot? You heard it? It's trash, right? The gunshot is trash?
Good morning, guys. Welcome to Let Your Voice Be Heard. We're a live radio show and a podcast, and we talk about politics, social issues, cultural issues, everything that's going on in our world, but from our perspective. I'm super happy to be here at Envision Fest. How are you guys feeling? Good. So my name is Selena Hill. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Miss Selena Hill. And please do follow. I will follow back. I have my co-host here, Stanley Engineer, a.k.a. Turn Up King.
No, I'm mad hype. I got a whole DJ system over here. I've been DJing since Friday. And by since Friday, what I mean is that I got to play with it Thursday, but I've been too busy to play with it. But I could do music. I got gunshot sound effects. Look at this. That's lit? No, okay, cool. So you can find me on Twitter at Stan Fritz. You can find me on IG at Stan Fritz. You can find me on Snapchat at Darkskin Swindle. But I only go on there to follow people that don't go on IG, so I follow nobody, and I'm not on there. All right.
And just FYI, guys, so this is our first live podcast show. We are super, super excited to be here. We've been doing this show for 6-7 years. We actually have a former co-host in the audience, Claudia, in the back. Thank you for coming out, sis, and supporting. So I just want to give you guys some information, some background on the show. And now introduce Tiffany, a.k.a. Tip L. Fizzle.
Yes, that's my rapper name. So I'm Tiffany. So that's Tiff with me. You can follow me on Instagram at Tiff with me, TIFFLIVE. And I'm really excited for the show. I'm really excited to be here at Vision Fest to talk about women in politics, especially Black women in politics. And shout out to my sister and my friends for coming.
Yay! I like how y'all gave yourself a round of applause. So we have a great show lined up. We're going to be talking about everything like Tiffany just said, women of color in politics, how we can walk into our purpose and into our power, and what needs to be done so that legislation and policy looks like it is affecting and helping and benefiting us. Right? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Trump. We're going to talk about Kamala. I don't know who stayed up to watch the debates like I did. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about white women going to jail for cheating to get their children into college. So we're going to talk about that as well. We have a lot to talk about. Tiffany, what are you looking forward to the most?
The most I'm looking forward to talking about is definitely also really dive into Kamala Harris. I feel like she gets some unnecessary pushback. So I'm really excited to talk about Kamala Harris.
How come Kamala was white people?
What?
How come Kamala was white people?
When she was a prosecutor?
Yeah, she was one of all the black people.
No, she can't go to jail. It's not go to jail.
Yeah, no. So we're gonna talk about that. I know Kamala's a little problematic. I don't know how many people have a candidate that you know you would vote for who's had to vote for today. Anybody? Okay. 2 out of 10. I know I have my candidate. So let's talk about politics, right? Because the election is literally a year out, and it's gonna be a big one. How many people are tired of Trump? How many people are willing to go to the polls to do something about it? All right, so we're going to talk about which candidate we should vote for. Who is going to represent us, women of color?
What about me?
What about you, Stanley?
You're right.
With that being said, I'm like, can we go on a quick break? I'm in radio mode, guys. So we do this show every Sunday morning, and I'm like, Stanley, can we go on a break now?
I can give us a song if you want.
Can we drop a song real quick?
You want to hear a song? What y'all want to hear? Pick a song. Somebody pick a song.
Cardi don't need no press.
All right. I don't got Cardi. All right. What else we got?
Press.
What else y'all want to hear?
No Cardi.
Nah. All right.
Jay-Z.
You want to hear some Meg Thee Stallion? I ain't got that either. What you want to hear?
Jay-Z.
Vision Fest,
Women.
I can envision you, Cardi. I just ain't got it here.
Jay-Z. Something Jay-Z.
Jay-Z? I ain't got that neither. All right. I got Migos though. Look, see? Yeah. Migos is here, watch. That's good, right? Now, so we're going to come right back to the new song, don't worry.
Fresh out the bed, can out the dead, fresh out the bed, can out the dead,
Yeah, I told you I had songs. That was hot, right? That was what you had? That was hot? No? Sis, you make it steady eye contact. Encourage me, please. No? Alright, cool. It's fine. I love these sound effects. What year came out? What year this song came out? They're really thinking about this, damn.
Throwback!
Alright. You know what?
It's all good. I'm ready to do it.
Alright, cool. Ready? Alright, cool. Here we go.
Alright, guys, so we are back again. This is Let Your
We
Voice
didn't know when
Be
you were there. They were
Heard.
with us the whole time.
Shout out to those who are listening via podcast on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and SoundCloud. You can find Let Your Voice Be Heard anywhere that you get your podcast. So please check us out there. Shout out to our live in-studio audience. We see you guys live at Envision Fest. So before we went on that little song break from Stanley over here, DJ No Show, no songs. Okay, so the Democratic debate, right? So it was really intense. This was the third one that happened. And honestly, I'm getting a little concerned about Joe Biden. He is the leading front runner so far in the primary. Meaning, if the election was today, Biden would win and go against Trump. However, is it just me, or is he having a number of senior moments? Meaning that he continues to stumble on his words, he continues to forget stuff, and at the Democratic debate, Julian Castro actually called him out, and he was like, bro, you just forgot what you said 2 minutes ago, and he kept pushing, and like, it was such an awkward moment, but the more I think about it, I'm just like, I don't know, like, I don't feel comfortable with Joe Biden as of now. Like, Tiffany, what were some of your highlights from the Democratic debate? That was a highlight for me, even though it was a bad one. What were some of your highlights?
Just to real quick talk about the Joe Biden interaction. I know Julian Castro was getting a lot of blowback from that. I don't know if it was necessarily like ages or more so just words matter and you should remember the things that you say, whether it's 2 minutes ago or years ago. I think for me a big highlight was, I feel like Elizabeth Warren always does well. I really appreciate her politics. I really appreciate her being vocal about women issues, especially when it comes to like healthcare. So a big highlight for me was Elizabeth Warren's, I would say, performance, and also just Julian Castro. I feel like he kind of broke out of the molds, and even though it was quote unquote a negative take, I feel like a lot of Black and brown candidates always have to like quiet themselves, which we'll talk about more in the show. But I think Julian Castro was also a standout too.
Stanley, you were watching the debates and live tweeting. What do you think?
I mean, these debates are not meant for you to understand who's really going to be good at the job or not. These debates are for people to get their arguments off, but not actually answer questions. With that being said, the person I'm here for is Elizabeth Warren, obviously, because she's Bernie Sanders with common sense and a plan. And the person I'm not here for is Joe Biden, because he literally does not know how to speak in coherent sentences anymore. And I'm trying to get that clip because I don't think people understand how ridiculous he sounded. It was wild. They said, you said this thing about school segregation. And he said, we need social workers to come to your house and put on a record player for your kids. That was his answer. So, I really want to find that clip because that was a nasty answer. And this guy might be our president, and he's not much more coherent than Trump. I think I got it right here. So let's give it a shot.
The Title I school.
That ain't gonna work. All right, we don't got the clip. Keep going.
Yeah, so as of now, I would say the third debate did not too much change my opinion on just like the Democratic primary. I'm still all for Bernie Sanders as of now. Definitely a fan of Elizabeth Warren. Kamala too, and we're going to talk more about that. She is the only Black woman in the race as of now, and we're going to delve into that a little more. But before we get there, speaking of Black people, how many people think it's time for Black athletes to leave white colleges? No. Oh, you do. You do. Okay, so Jamel Hill, she wrote this article. It's a powerful piece. It's called Time for Black Athletes to Leave White Colleges. And what she's saying is, if you're a Black athlete, why are you going to these white institutions, these PWIs, and making them so much money when we need that support and that money in our own communities? So, of course, Jamel, being a young, fly Black woman, people started raising hell when she wrote this piece in The Atlantic, going off. Tip, your reaction?
It's not surprising. She's a really polarizing figure, especially when it comes to sports and activism. And the whole point that she was making is that a lot of these PWIs get large endowments, and because of their sports programs, they get a lot of money. And when it comes to these HBCUs, which is oftentimes they're federally granted funds, and they have been struggling. We've been seeing in the news that many of the HBCUs are struggling, and also many of the HBCUs have shifted their demographic, where the majority of the demographic are now white students, which is perfectly fine. So what she's trying to say that that these athletes bring large amounts of money and support to these colleges. So, why can't they go to a Lincoln? Why can't they go to a Howard to also bring that sort of investment to those colleges? And also, HBCUs were, started due to segregation and racism and just, overall pressure in this society. And there was a need for HBCUs. So why can't, HBCUs be in the running when it comes to sports? Because, sports garner so much money for colleges.
Why can't we be honest about it? You got all these Black athletes going to these white schools, making these colleges billions of dollars. The colleges won't even guarantee you education if you don't make it through the league. They're not going to invest in your communities. They're going to get big checks to a whole bunch of racist white people. And when those white people do racist white people things, they're going to be like, well, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. And then when that player spirals out because maybe he or she can't get into the league, or they injure themselves so they can't play anymore, they lose their scholarship. So if you're going to go over there and make somebody millions and billions of money, why not do it for your own people? Most of these HBCUs are struggling with finances. They can't get through the day-to-day. Imagine if a Zion Williamson or even a Kobe Bryant, when he was young enough to go to college, played at a Morehouse College or a Howard University. Or Brittany Griner, if instead of going to Baylor, she went to Spelman. Could you imagine how much money they will bring into those colleges? And those colleges are able to put all the things they do in those schools because of Black labor. So if they're getting Black labor and making money off of Black labor, but they're not supporting Black bodies, why would you keep supporting them? Go to an HBCU.
So these arguments make sense, right? The pushback was, oh, we shouldn't be supporting segregation. You know, if we tell black athletes just stay in black schools, are we having a more divided society? That's the arguments I was saying, Tiffany.
So I can't remember the person's name, but he was on Laura
Ingram's show. Yep.
And she tried to say like we're trying to do like resegregation as if like PYI schools are like extremely diverse. So that's like one thing. But also we all know that like white people and other people of color are going to HBCUs. Like just disclaimer, like white people not can go to HBCUs, like and you already are going to these schools. So there's no notion that you are having some sort of segregation or re-segregation. And it was just Laura Ingram, purposefully missing the point as she normally does when it comes to these issues.
Anybody here go to an HBCU, a historically black college university? I see you, sis. What school?
Woo!
Hampton, love it. Anybody else?
Nobody else can afford.
We went to a PWI, a predominantly white institution. We went to SUNY Old Westbury, Selena and I, which is really an HBCU if you dorm. So, I guess it's kind of halfway.
Well, speaking of dorming in colleges, do you guys think that people who cheat to get their children into colleges should go to jail? So, as we mentioned earlier today, Felicity Huffman, who is, a white woman, she will be serving 14 days in federal prison for cheating to get her child in college. However, people are saying that sentence is way too harsh. She put out a letter saying, I had anxiety about being a good mom. I didn't want to be a bad mother. So, that's what they're saying. But I just want to point out, a few years ago, there was a black woman, I think in Connecticut, who was homeless. And she signed up her child for like a kindergarten that was outside of the district, so she faked her address. This woman spent 5 years behind bars. Felicity is only doing 14 days. Tiffany?
She's going to do 14. She's probably going to get out in 3 for good behavior. So, I really struggle with this whole story because I don't think the notion should be because this black mother spent 5 years in prison that Felicity Huffman should also spend 5 years in prison. No one should spend time in prison for, wanting to give your child a good education. I understand the petty. I sympathize with the petty. Okay, I recognize the petty. But I feel like these stories should just highlight the disparities when it comes to the criminal justice system. No one should go to jail for like I said, trying to get your child into a good school. But the issue is because she has tons of money, that's why she's able to get a 14-day prison sentence and not, spend 5 years in prison or also have to pay back a large amount of money, like I think that mom that you mentioned in Connecticut. So that's what you see when it comes to being one, a white woman, one having privilege and one having access to wealth. So, it's just a combination of things that it comes out and you ended up spending only 14 days in prison.
Stanley, where do you stand? To be petty or not to be petty?
Half and half. We should be abolishing prisons, period. Because prisons have been used to exploit black labor and reinstate slavery in this country, right? At the same time, this white lady is trash, and that happens all the time. Usually it happens with mediocre white men who want to get into these Ivy League colleges and get in there because their parent went there. John F. Kennedy applied to Harvard. In his admission letter, he said, I want to go to Harvard because my dad did. Period. And then his dad stapled a letter saying, put my son into Harvard. That's how we got in there. You got black and brown bodies being thrown in jails and prisons all the time. The group with the highest rate of imprisonment in the country right now are black women. So you can't tell me this is just because, we really shouldn't be throwing people in jails and prisons. Because Felicity Huffman, even if she didn't have the money, she's got the white. So they probably would have helped her anyway because that's just the way that privilege works in our criminal justice system. We got to be honest about that. There was a woman who killed her baby and buried the baby and said, I fixed my stomach issue. She got no jail time. We got to look at the way the criminal justice system is unfairly prosecuting black and brown bodies and not holding other people accountable in the same way. So it's not really about Felicity. It's about the racist, patriarchal, capitalistic society that we live in and what we're going to do about it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that Stanley says. And it's true. The fastest growing population in prisons are black women. And that's really troubling. So when you do have a story like Felicity Huffman, it's hard to see the nuance in it and you just want to immediately be petty and be like, no, lock her up, throw her in a key, and all of that. But again, we do have to, abolish prison or have like real significant reforms when it comes to prisons and how we penalize people over crimes, especially crimes that don't result in any sort of harm to another person, things like that.
Well, and that's the argument that Felicity Huffman's lawyers were making. They were saying this was a victimless crime, like no one was really hurt. However, her child took up a seat that someone else deserved. So, that is that's your life right there. So, that being said, I want to talk more about black women in prison because there was this Texas mother who was sentenced to 5 years in prison for, quote unquote, voting illegally in 2016. So, she had did some time. But she was released, and she was on supervised release after serving time for tax fraud. And she filled out a provisional ballot and got sentenced to 5 years, literally for voting in 2016. Tiffany, you were the person who brought this story to my attention. Let's talk about just the discrepancies here, and why are we locking up black women for voting? Like, I'm trying to get y'all to vote in 2020. Like, this is discouraging.
Right. So obviously it really highlights voter suppression, right? So that story is really interesting because she was out on supervised provision. So when she filed the ballot, which is a provisional ballot, and provisional ballots can be filed because you're not sure you're voting, you may not be voting in the right county, but it's provisional so they can figure that all out. So once they figured out that she couldn't vote, they said, okay, all right, this vote is not going to count. But because the DA dug into the story even more, she ultimately violated her parole. So that's why she had to go back into prison. And the family, the home went into foreclosure, and she had a young daughter that's taking up all of the family matters. And it goes to this narrative that Republicans tried to put out there that black and brown people are coming into our country and trying to vote illegally, and then what white society they think is going to be is no longer going to exist. So I think ultimately they're trying to make an example out of her. It's a form of voter intimidation, voter suppression. And the only witness that they had in the case was one person that said that she looked like she was reading over the document, the signed affidavit part. And how many times we have checked I agree to something and we know we didn't read it? Raise your hand if you've done that before. Everyone, even on the sides over there, everyone has done that to an extent. So for that to be their nail in the coffin, it's bogus, and we know it's bogus.
Texas and other countries across the South have been trying to block black and brown people from voting everywhere. So when we've shown that they're trying to actively block black and brown people from voting, their response has been people are committing voter fraud. Well, we know that voter fraud happens less than 0.06% of the time across the entire country. So instead of making it easier for people to vote, they've implemented these rules that penalize anybody that messes up. Over the last 15 years, there have been 6 people who have committed voter fraud. They've all been white. They've all been Republicans. This woman was their chance to be see, the other people do it too. And that's what's happening here. Because Texas is under a lot of scrutiny. They tried to close the polling sites in almost all the black neighborhoods. They are requiring IDs to go vote, and they tried to close all the DMVs in the black and brown neighborhoods. And when the heat came on for that, this became the perfect Trojan horse to gaslight away from this. So if you really want to talk about making significant change that doesn't just improve your day-to-day life, but also improves the day-to-day life of all black and brown people in an effort for black liberation, you've really got to be looking at the way that they're criminalizing people and destroying their past, present, and futures, because the repercussions of incarceration go much further than just one person. Now that child is going to be significantly damaged. Are they getting therapy? Do they have the funding to keep that person in a good school? What happens when that woman gets out? Do you know how many jobs and trainings you're blocked out of because you're formerly incarcerated? So now you're setting her up to be in a minimum wage job for the rest of her life. If she's lucky, can't get housing, child probably has abandonment issues now, and then they're going to blame it on her. This is pretty much the system working perfectly in Texas.
That being said, before we wrap up the news roundup and move into our main segment, which again is about women in politics, us walking in power, another story I definitely want to bring up is the story about the Bahamas refugees who were denied access to the States. I know we are all keeping Bahamas in our thoughts, those people, the victims, in our thoughts and our prayers, except for maybe Donald Trump, who literally said, we got to keep out the bad people in gangs. Literally. So he was questioned about why I think 100 or a couple dozen Bahamas refugees were denied entry into the States. Quote unquote, they didn't have all their documentation or their passports. And his administration was saying, oh no, we want to let people in because they're trying to escape devastation. However, he was like, we got to be careful. We don't want to let the bad people in because some of the people in Bahamas are in gangs and stuff. And I'm just like, really? I mean, Tiffany, maybe you weren't surprised, but I was just like, he always hits a new low. I mean.
Yeah, the bar is in hell, so it doesn't matter. Was I surprised? No, because we've seen this time and time again. I just thought the video, when you saw them actively pulling them off the ferry, was really just like saddening, because I think normally they're allowed to travel with like a police record and like their birth certificate or some sort of identification, and that has been happening for some time. I also did read that someone was trying to insinuate that like how they were interpreting the law could have been, wrong. So that's why now this is the moment when people are in extreme distress. That's when we want to start interpreting the law appropriately. So I'm not surprised. Pretty much it's like, what he does. He's not going to let you Negroes come into our country, because you're from gangs and yada, yada. But I think it was Morgan State or one of the HBCUs that paid for the tuition of some of the refugees that were going to college out in the Bahamas, which is a HBCU. So there you go. Even more reason why you need to support HBCUs.
This is not surprising at all. Did you guys know that the highest group of deportations are black groups? You come from a black or majority black country, you're probably getting deported. So it hasn't actually been Mexicans or people from South America who are getting deported the most. It's actually been Jamaica and Haiti and Dominican Republic and Nigeria and Ghana and Uganda people. Like, those are the folks who are getting deported at the highest clips. This is pretty consistent with what the administration has been doing. But it's once again the reason why you have to be radically informed, and you have to understand that this is not about protecting anybody. This is not about gang culture. This is about a concerted attack against black and brown people. So, yeah, and shout out to, was it Morehouse that did that?
I think it was Morgan State.
Oh, Morgan State, yeah. One semester is Gucci.
Yeah. I just want to also just add to what Stanley was saying, just about when we think about immigration, there's a particular face that may pop into our minds, and sometimes I think even as like black folks or people who identify black, we also need to understand that this immigration issue is something that we need to mobilize about, whether you have citizenship or not, that we are all being attacked on all fronts. And I know sometimes that could be like a issue that some could be like sometimes like divisive, or just like, well, I have my, citizenship, so I'm good. Good luck. But it's like, no, like they look like you. We come from, the same diaspora, so we need to be more conscious of when we talk about immigration.
They're deporting people who are citizens. No, seriously.
Yes, no, they are.
They deported a guy who was born in America. His family's from Iraq. They deported him back to Iraq. He died in the streets. They're deporting people who were born here, but their families are from Jamaica. They don't actually care. We need to, we really need to understand the stakes of this. And I feel like as people of color, we're just kind of used to everybody not liking us anyway, so you kind of become numb to it. But this is different. This is very, very different, and we need to be hyper vigilant about that.
Absolutely. And on that note, I know we're going to take another song break, and we're going to switch up the tone because
I want to do it
right?
it's fun.
And we know what's going on. It's time for us to take action, to walk in that power, to walk in our purpose, and to get involved politically.
Yeah, hoorah shit, with my hoorah friends, ayy. Everywhere we go, ayy, we be drinking hen, ayy. Shake that ass, bitch, bounce that shit, ayy. Yeah, hoorah shit, with my hoorah friends, ayy. Yeah, hoorah shit, yeah, hoorah shit, ayy. Doing hoorah shit, yeah, with my hoorah friends, ayy. Yeah, hoorah shit, with my hoorah friends, ayy. Doing hoorah shit, with my hoorah friends, ayy. I'm from South Park, I be in dead end. I moved to the burbs and put my friends on some lists. They wanna know about me, they say tell me your story. Only thing you need to know is I'm in love with the money. Hey, out here and I'm getting it. Hey, young rich bitch, I'm pretty. Hey, little bitty waist, big titties. Yeah, whole lot of hot shit. 4-5-0, can't stop shit. Hey, all my niggas gon' pop shit. Hey, big old ass. All my bitches gon' pop shit. Yeah, hoorah shit.
All right, guys, thank you again for tuning in and checking out Let Your Voice Be Heard. If you are listening and you're here at Envision Fest, shout out to you guys. If you're listening via podcast, thank you so much, and please share, tweet this link out. So again, my name is Selena Hill, got Tiffany Brown, Stanley Fritz, and we want to talk about what needs to be done so that we can take our place in politics and power. We have a raging idiot in the White House, but you know what? Even though we have him there, a lot of women, especially women of color, have been getting elected on local levels, state levels. In November 2018, actually, a whole sweep of us just came into Congress, right? That's how we got the squad. My girl AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a number of people, Ilhan Omar, but they're being attacked, and they're being attacked a lot. I think it's because they're women of color. So before we get into that, I do want to just recap Kamala's performance during the debate. You mentioned that earlier, Tiff, because I know a lot of us feel, well, some of us feel connected to her because, you know, she can identify with us. But others who know her record say not so much. Tiffany?
I think Kamala's performance at the debate was pretty measured to an extent. I think she was really reserved in how she responded to questions because I think she's pretty conscious of how she is perceived and how she often comes off. There was this discussion on Twitter that, you know, sometimes she may have seemed that she's like measured or like too fiery and things of that nature. So I think her performance was kind of like solid. I don't know if she was like really a standout because I think oftentimes women of color in politics, they don't want to be too aggressive. They don't want to be too this. There was an interesting exchange with the activist, I think her name is Brittany Packnett, and Meghan McCain, where Meghan was like, oh my God, Kamala seems so rehearsed. And it's just like, so do you want someone that's prepared or not? So it's like, here you have a black woman who's probably overly prepared, and the thought that like you just want a president that's just kind of like spitballing, which is what we currently have. So I thought her performance was measured, not to stand out, but I think we're going to get into more depth about like, you know, why people don't like her.
Raise your hand if you thought Kamala did well. Raise your hand. Did Kamala do well at the debate? I see 1, I see 2, I see 3, 4, 5. Raise your hand if you thought Bernie is killing it. I see 1.
He's just loud.
I see 2. Damn. Is there anybody that anyone likes that's running for president right now? Just throw out a name.
Warren.
Who? Bernie? I hear Bernie. Go ahead, Selena.
Well,
what kind of straw poll was that?
Anyway, so Stanley, thank you for surveying the crowd. Has your opinion about Kamala's candidacy changed at all? Again, she is the only black woman currently in the Democratic primary race.
She's the only black woman candidate there. She's probably one of the better candidates, too. But yes. I cannot stand her criminal justice platform, and I hate the fact that she had not only fought to arrest parents whose kids were truant, but also when it was a proposition that wanted to get people out of California jails early because of overcrowding, only people with nonviolent crimes, she petitioned against it and said because if we did that, we will be getting rid of all of the free labor in the jails. So stuff like that from Kamala, I really don't like. If I got to choose between her and Trump, I'm picking Kamala, but I'll pick an empty bottle of Hennessy with a little bit of apple juice in it, and I'm allergic to apples before I pick Trump anyway.
So you rather end up in the hospital?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm with you on that. I mean, I feel like Kamala, like, to me, she's a very strong candidate. Maybe not my favorite, but I would love to see her go head-to-head with Trump because she is a prosecutor, so she will lawyer the mess out of that man. Like, he's not going to dance circles around Kamala. She'll be like, oh, no, boo-boo, and she will definitely put him in his place. So that's what I would say. And at this point, anybody is much better than Trump. And, you know, Stanley just spoke about her track record, which is a little problematic. No candidate in this race has a perfect track record. You can dig up dirt on everybody. Even Elizabeth Warren, who happens to be these two favorites, you know, she was claiming to be Native American, to use some advantages. That's why Trump calls her Pocahontas. So I'm just trying to say...
Which is offensive. He shouldn't call it.
He should stop. He should stop
She
saying
was Native American for like 15 minutes, though. Like, she apologized for that.
She did apologize.
She did a DNA test, Stanley. Stop it.
Yeah, she did. She doubled down on it. She did double
Sis
down
did a
on
DNA test. That's what she messed up.
But, like, you can't trust Ancestry. My friend did Ancestry. And
no, seriously, don't do that.
When that DNA came back in, it was just like they had just circled the globe and, like, you were from here. Like, you can't trust that.
But the fact that she did it, though, I think that's the issue. Like, she shouldn't have done it.
Yeah, bad PR move. We can agree there. So, I mean, hey, well, I do want to switch gears a little bit because given the history of women in politics, we all know Shirley Chisholm was the trailblazer who really edged that path for Kamala and other women of color who happen to be in politics. Do you think America is finally ready to elect a black woman for president? And if not president, just get more of us in the Congress.
Me? Go for it, Stanley.
No, but they weren't ready for a black guy either, and they showed that to us. But who cares? You don't ask for permission. You take power. That's what Obama did. He ran a successful campaign and he took power. So whether white America is ready or not, we got to just start taking stuff. That's what Trump did. That's why we're here now. So if she's a nominee, I'm going with her all the way, and I'll cuss out anybody who tries to slander her.
I think there's a booth over there that says the future been female, and I really like that because I feel like black women have always been empowered to some extent, whether they want to give us the credit or not. I just think, of course, I want to see a black woman president, but I'm just really concerned about all of the pushback. She's going to be called all sorts of monkeys and N-words, and I just like, oh my God, I feel like no one should have to deal with that. We saw what happened with the first lady, Michelle Obama. So it's not a matter of whether they're ready or not. Like, studies will show when you have more diverse people in the electoral field, whether it's a black woman or a Native American person or someone who identifies as Muslim, their beliefs tends to be a little bit more left-leaning or more progressive just in nature. Maybe not as left as we are currently, but they do tend to include more people than just themselves. So I think by having a black woman or a woman of color in the office, you will see the overall improvement of society. And this is not to say that all, people of color or black women are as progressive, because we do have some, off the wall folks out there, which, they drink from a different cup. But
Candace.
But yeah.
I mean, the way I feel, I do not think this country is ready for a black woman president. I don't even know if the country deserves one. I mean, like you said, the slander. I mean, Michelle Obama, she is our forever FLOTUS, and so elegant, so graceful, so brilliant, and they found ways to slander her. I mean, it's like, I'm not saying I've given up, but I don't know if I want to put sis through that. You know what I'm saying? Put Bernie up in there, his crazy self.
I think he'll die. I don't think.
Okay, y'all. People need to stop saying Bernie's about to pass.
He's 12 years old.
You're not supposed to be doing. That's bad energy.
He's a little older than Trump. He's fine.
And Trump's about to die too. Have you seen him?
Yes.
They have the best doctors and everything. Listen, they're pumping him up with everything. Yeah, he's not going anywhere.
I know I'm slim thick, but Bernie, Trump he's not looking good. He got to lay off the McDonald's. No,
he does.
But seriously, I mean, we can't. It doesn't matter if you're ready.
Yeah.
The revolution doesn't wait for you to be ready. The revolution revolutionizes, and you got to step up, and we got to fight back.
But Stanley, with that being said, we see what's happening to the squad, the 4 women of color in Congress who are extremely vocal, who lean very left, who represent my opinion and my ideas. Look what they're going through.
Yeah, so we got to have their backs. And not just AOC and Ilham Omar, who get a lot of the press, but also Ayanna Pressley from Boston, who took the seat of a very popular congressperson who also happens to be Chris Evans, a.k.a. Captain America's uncle. Yep. So that's a woman they're going to be coming after. We got to make sure we have their backs. But that's the problem. People run for office, especially people of color, and they get in office and we're hype and we don't show up for them. As someone who works in politics, I can't tell you how often I see black women in the state Senate and the state assembly who are struggling to fundraise so they can stay in office and keep fighting. Diana Richardson is somebody who I think about. She's an assembly member in Brooklyn for East Flatbush. When we had that blackout, she was showing up to the building, bringing food and water to everybody, making sure they were good. How much money does she have in the campaign coffers right now? Not a lot. She got an election coming up in April. Where are we? Pardon me, in June. Where are we? We got to show up for them. So we got to show up for the squad, but we also got to show up for the women who are building their power at the state and local level. So Diana Richardson, who's running for office, Lori Cumbo, even though I don't always agree with her politics, and the city council, Latrice Walker, and the assembly. We got to be showing up all the time.
Definitely echo what Stanley is saying about showing up for a woman of color. And Diana Richardson is a really good person to use as an example because she's so active in Brooklyn. She is everywhere, and she really does give it up for her community. But like Stanley said, oftentimes these women are not going to be on TV. They fly under the radar. And, contrary to popular belief, all politics is really, really local. So, your city council member, your state senator, and your state assembly member has, a lot of impact on your everyday as you move through society, even more so than, your congressperson or the president. So we need to be really, looking out for those candidates.
I got a comment. I started a watch party because they like my gunshot sound effects over here. And Mariah T. Lopez said to me, I'm piecing out of the shop because y'all support Kamala, and Kamala's a cop. Does anybody else in here think Kamala's a cop? I mean, she is a cop. But anybody else in here think she's a cop?
And just to give some context, because when she was the first black woman to be a prosecutor in California, she was AKA the top cop. And some of the policies that she enforced and implemented weren't as conducive to our communities. And I know we can talk more about that, Stanley.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, you want to go, Tiff?
I'll start it off. So I feel like, when people just say, like, she's a cop, she's a senator, I just kind of feel like it's such a micro way of, like, looking at an issue. I think oftentimes we have to just like look at, the context of the law, look at the times that was happening, especially like the 80s and 90s and things like that, early 2000s when like, black and brown communities were under extreme distress due to like, crack and this, that, and the third. So I feel like we kind of like built up this way of dealing with like I would say like social service like issues with jail, right? That's the way that's the model that America has set up. The way you deal with people suffering, especially black and brown people, you just put them in prisons. So I'm not surprised that oftentimes even people that look like us, talk like us, come from the same communities, kind of replicate that same sort of idea. Yes, we do have to hold her accountable because if you feel like there's an issue when it's coming to truancy or if there's an issue
What's
with...
truancy?
Truancy is when pretty much the children were either not showing up to school or just showing up late. And from my understanding, that was a large, issue happening in California, and they were trying to connect that with like human trafficking and things like that.
So they were locking up the parents if their children weren't
going
to school.
Yeah, so parents were being threatened with prison. From my understanding, no parents were actually locked up. And she references one story of how this woman was actively having issues, and she was able to provide services. So I think oftentimes instead of like, taking that route, like, okay, if we see there's an issue here in the community, rather than saying like, I'm going to lock you up, I guess as to like, a shock value or, to be provocative to like, quote unquote, wake up parents, because it's this notion that black and brown parents don't care about education, which you all know is not true. That's the method that she went. So yes, she should be called out about that. But I think a lot of, black and brown communities have like real, I would say precarious situation when it comes to the law and how we approach the law and accountability and things like that.
Yeah, no, and now, just real quick, Stanley, and I mean, I would agree that we do need to just hold her accountable for her track record, but it was a different time. I think if Barack Obama ran in 2019, he would be too conservative or moderate for us, right? So it was over a decade ago when people got away with saying things like, oh, super predator, or, we got to lock them up. That's the way to fight crime. You got to pull up your pants. That's the way to stop getting pulled over by police. Like, that was the mentality back then. And I think she succumbed to that to a large degree. And I also think she did her job, as she did her job good. Like, her job was to lock people up.
The job of district attorneys across this country is to lock up black and brown people. She did a really good job at that. Congratulations. Listen, like, I don't dislike Kamala, but like, let's be very honest about her record and what she did. There were things that you got to do because it's your job, and then there are things she did, like prosecute a woman with mental health issues that the San Francisco police shot. Why? Why did you have to do that? When the police shot her, especially when we know the police are historically known to be shooting black and brown people for no reason. Why did she have to do that? Why did, when a man was found not guilty after spending 25 years in prison for murder, she tried to petition to stop him from being released from the prison? Why did she have to do that? What part of the job was that? What part of the job was it when she was fundraising, she was bragging about the truancy program and said, when people say you're cruel, that's mean, you can't punish parents, she laughed and said, why not? But now she wants to run for president, and she's not even sitting here like, yo, like, I messed up. I shouldn't have done this. She's just trying to ignore it or gaslight away from it. Let's be honest about it. Now, because she's a sister, she's going to get some slack from me because we get put into the white supremacist institution, and we have to respond. But we still got to call her out for it. Now, Joe Biden, he's garbage. He's done. But, like, if we can acknowledge what Joe Biden did, and he was BFS with Barack Obama, why can't we hold Kamala accountable? Why can't she admit that she did something wrong? Probably because A, she doesn't believe she did, or B, her consultants are telling her, don't admit you're wrong because you'll look weak. And that's not restorative. That's not healthy.
And, just real quick, I agree that at least with Kamala, we can hold her accountable because if we were to elect her and we become her constituency, she answers to us, and we can have that conversation with her.
I definitely understand everything that you're saying, Stanley. But I think the fact that, we have Joe Biden, he wrote the crime bill, which is, a huge factor as why we have mass incarceration. Like, with that same thinking, like, he shouldn't even be on the stage. He should just not be on the stage. So I think, yes, we have to hold her accountable, but there seems to be, like, levels of accountability because I feel like Joe Biden is getting a lot of passes. I think Essence just did a poll that, like, a lot of young women within our, millennial demographic, like, are kind of, like, liking Joe. And I just
young
think
people
that's
like Joe Biden?
Weird. And
I thought it was older people.
I think, because I feel like Biden provides them a sense of security as the way things were when Obama was in office.
What was the age breakdown of that survey? That was probably 40 up.
No, it was like our age group from like 21 to like 34.
I don't know. Well, we live in a bubble, Stanley,
Yeah.
so maybe it's the middle of the country who likes Joe Biden.
Raise your hand if you like Joe Biden.
You can say, and
No
don't be
one-
afraid or ashamed to admit it.
Yeah, I'm not going to slander
okay.
you. Okay,
We
King,
have-
thank you.
Oh.
Huh? Oh, he gave. All right, so he gave.
Oh,
a finger
he
to Joe
raised
Biden.
a finger,
Well, here's
not a
to Joe
hand.
Biden. Yeah.
Here's something else. Most people are not listening to 45,000 political podcasts and
Nope.
the New York Times and following this stuff as closely as we do. So all they know is that Joe Biden was vice president and him and Barack Obama were good friends. So they see that, so they think it's great. They don't know that Joe Biden in the 70s was like, I think segregation is stupid and we shouldn't be putting these black kids who could be a danger to our kids in these white schools. They don't know that he was BFFs or white supremacists. They don't know the crime bill where he said, this is going to put the fear of God into these little black kids who are super predators. They don't know that stuff. They also don't know that the majority of the black caucus also voted for that crime bill. And that Al Sharpton was like, let's get this crime bill through. Because to some extent, you're right, the world has changed.
That was the sentiment of the times. And, that's what the culture was at that time. I mean, that being said, I just want to just get back on track with just women, the state of women of color in particular in politics. We see Joe Biden. We know how he's problematic. We talked about Kamala. She's not the only black woman or woman of color who is deserving of mention and press in politics. What would you say is the current state?
I think the current state of politics, I'm really excited in terms of women of color. And there's also a lot of organizations that are recruiting women of color to run for office, which I think we'll probably get to very like actionable steps. But I think the current state of women of politics when it comes to women of color is that more women are running and they see that they can win. And just to use AOC, because I know everyone knows her, like, she knocked off Joe Crowley. And if you understand Queens politics and you just understand his position in Congress, he was one of the most powerful Democrats. And for her to knock him off and now she's like, she's not only a target when it comes to Republicans, she's a target when it comes to establishment Dems. So if you are a woman of color and you just, go out there and you have support, you can get it done. And we're seeing that like nationally in Ohio and in Boston and even right here in New York State. So I do think we're going to see even more women of color running for office, which I think we do definitely need.
Stanley, earlier you talked about once a woman of color is elected, show up for her. To take that a step back, what needs to be done to get more of us in these positions?
So first off, let's use New York State, for example, right? Say you want to run for city council. You're probably going to need about between $150,000 to $300,000 to run a viable campaign. New York City Council does this thing called a publicly financed system. What that means is if Selena wants to run for office, right, and she fundraised $10 off of each of you, the city will match it plus $8 additional dollars. So if Selena runs for office, I donate $10, that 10 turns to 70, right? So now she can actually run a viable campaign, which means you have the money to hire consultants, field people, do commercials, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why you see more black women and women of color in the New York City Council. In the state Senate and the state assembly, they don't have that. So you got to play the game, you got to play politics, and as somebody who's in Albany a lot, just like Tiff over here, we can both tell you it's wild, sexist, and problematic, and dudes think it's 1925 over there. You'll be right there in the hallway, and somebody will come, a state senator will come, and slap a woman's behind, and be like, where's breakfast? Just
I have a story.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I interned for the New York State Assembly in like 2010. And if you were 21, even if you were 21, you couldn't go to any of the senator like after work happy hour mixers. And certain senators weren't even allowed to have interns in their offices.
Whoa.
So that's like the culture.
Hold on. Let me just let that rest. It was so bad that a woman under 21 couldn't go to her boss's office?
No, so they couldn't go to like any of the happy hours. So even if you were 21, they still wouldn't allow you to go. And then I also had an assembly.
Because they didn't trust him or
They didn't
her?
trust the assembly members. And I even had an assembly member that sent me a friend request on Facebook like, hey, I just saw you, smiley face. And I was like, sir, are you for real right now?
He's probably like 57, right?
Yes, you know it. He's from Brooklyn. He's not in office anymore. So, but it's very true, and it's harder for women of color, especially in the state, to break into it. And you need way more money. And if you look at it, a lot of them are incumbents. Many of our state assembly members and senators, they haven't even been primary. I think this year would be a little bit different. But a lot of them have been in office for 20, 15 years, never had a primary since they got elected. And, you know, they're really, like, talk about establishment. Like, that's what you talk about when it comes to, like, establishment. Like, all they have to do is show it to a few block parties, and that's it, and they're just going to get reelected.
Yeah. But, like, there are women who are in office who you can support. So Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who's a state senator for Westchester and Yonkers, I'm probably forgetting some other parts what she represents.
Mm-hmm.
She's the majority leader of the New York State Senate Democrats.
And the first black woman.
The first black woman, too. And the governor actively blocked her from taking that role for years.
Yep.
She got it this year. We passed a huge housing bill where they can't ask you for more than first month rent or security, where they can't try to repair the doorknob and raise rent by $100 for it for no reason, where they can't tell you that they got to charge you $500 per application fee, protecting housing rights. She helped to pass bail reform. She really pushed policy forward. If we want to see more Andrea Stewart-Cousins in office, not just at state senate or assembly, but everywhere else, a publicly financed system is how you do it. Because all of a sudden, you don't got to go to those nasty county parties where it's a whole bunch of old dudes in baggy suits, smelling like Hennessy and old cigarettes, being mad handsy, talking about, I want to mentor you.
Yes.
Because that's what's happening. Nope, you don't got to do that. You can go get your friends and be like, yo, give me $10. I'm running for office. That's how you get more people in office. Right now, they're looking for a challenger to go against AOC.
Yep.
And thankfully, she's high profile enough where she could raise the money. But I tell you, she didn't have the money last time, but she had people knocking on doors. That's not sustainable. We got to be able to have our people and our candidates be able to make the money to run for office. There's a race happening in the Bronx for the Congressional District 15. There are 2 women of color running there, a Dominican sister and there's a black sister, a Jamaican sister. Neither one of them is able to raise money. So you know who's probably going to get that seat?
Richie Torres.
No, Ruben Diaz Sr.
Oh, my God, yeah.
The Democrat who's also a Trump supporter and hates, well, I don't know if he hates gay people, but he's wild homophobic and transphobic and sexist, and said he wouldn't report sexual harassment because he's not a snitch. But the 2 women of color are not, like, they might not even make petition because they can't raise the money.
Stanley, just to wrap up, is there anything else that needs to be done to continue to foster diversity and inclusion in today's political climate?
Yeah, guys like me should get that out of the way. A lot of, like, what happens a lot is because, you know, I speak fast, but I can speak. I have a political analysis. I'm somewhat funny, so people always want to put me to the front. Anywhere I go, whether it's a press conference, a rally, a meeting, and 11 out of 10 times, it's usually a black woman like Tiffany who's organized that meeting, who's put the notes together, who's made a campaign plan, who's got everyone together, but they want to listen to my leadership. So shut the hell up. Get out of the way. What are the most radical things you can do as a man to support black women and women of color in general? Is to get out of the way and be humble about it. That's what you can do.
And just to take it just a step further, how else are you personally supporting your friends or women in politics? Do you donate? Do you talk to them? Do you recommend them for positions of power?
Yeah. So, like, my philosophy is we should be getting our people jobs, period. I don't care if they don't know how to do the job all the way. I've seen some folks who don't know how to do anything, and they're running organizations. So that's 1. 2, like, I work in politics. I know what it takes to run a campaign. I've worked on campaigns. If you want to run for office, we can have a conversation. If I can't do it, I will connect to the people. Diana Richardson, who I said I adore, she's a great assemblywoman. I'm doing a fundraiser for her in October, so we can do that. There are plenty of folks running for office. We can find ways to support, and if you don't have the money to give, when election season comes, particularly petitioning season, go volunteer and petition for somebody. Go talk to your neighbors. It doesn't take a lot, but a lot of times these women, when they get into office, they're not just facing the fact that they got to raise funds. There's also inherent sexism because you don't want to listen to the women that are there. Then there's the men who think that once a woman steps into a space, she becomes his plaything. So now she has to worry about her safety and agency. So we can show up for our folks in a lot of ways. Sometimes that means, like for me, shutting the hell up. Other times it means when I know that creepy senator is over there holding Tiffany hostage at the Renaissance Hotel, and I've been drinking seltzer, but he been drinking Hennessy, I can go over there and start talking to Tiffany and walk her away. That's what I can do as a man. I wish there was no dudes around here, but there you go, bro, right here. Like, so that's what we can do.
Thank you, Stanley. Tiffany, what needs to be done to continue to foster diversity and inclusion in today's political climate? You also work in these political environments, so speaking from your firsthand experience, what can we do to support you?
Right, yeah, so I work for a labor union. I do their political and communications work, so pretty much similar to what Stanley does. And I work with like a lot of different candidates and just reading different like questionnaires and their platforms, so I also can like provide tips on that. But they say that women who want to run for office, they need to be asked at least 7 times. And I feel like my friends have asked at least 7 times. If you want to run for office, like they said, normally they're asked at least 7 times before they like kind of consider it. So, and there's a bunch of groups out there like Amplify Her, 21 by 21, which is a really great organization because their whole goal is to elect at least 21 women of color or women in general to the city council because many of those seats are going to be open. And like Stanley said, like petitioning, I come from the union and the labor world, which is a dinosaur in itself, but it's, slowly moving more to the left. But like when it comes to money, you need to reach out to the organizations, to, endorse you so they can also, contribute to your campaign and, hold fundraisers. And it doesn't have to be like a huge fundraiser, It could just be something small where you just have like a little kickback at your house and everyone can donate just like $100 just so to get your campaign going. So you don't feel like you have to like go out there and do the extreme for these women of color candidates. Like, I believe it was Sabrina Fulton, Trayvon Martin's mother. She's running for, I think, a commissioner seat or a county seat out in Florida. And I donated like $50 to her campaign. I'm like, I have no real political ties to Florida, but I know there's a woman that suffered an extreme tragedy and she needs help with her campaign, so I'm going to donate that. So I think it's just simple things like that, like volunteering your time if you're artistic, but also like looking out for, organizations like an Envision Fest, like an Amplify Her, and like a 21 by 21 that are primarily geared to electing women of color. And if you want to run for office, like Stanley said, you can come talk to us, Selena, or reach out to those groups because definitely there are groups out there that want women of color to run.
Absolutely. And just to wrap up the conversation, I would just say we just need to keep in mind that when we elect people that look like us, they're going to do the work that directly affects us and our communities. For instance, just in July, Governor Cuomo signed a law that outlaws racial discrimination based on your hair. So before this, you could legally get fired for wearing braids, an afro, going natural, rocking those curls. There were so many things, so many loopholes that people would do just to discriminate against us. So now that we have more representation, we're seeing things like this pass in New York and also in California because, this directly affects our livelihoods. I think another big thing is also for us to stay informed about the issues, subscribe. I mean, just to shamelessly plug, let your voice be heard, but we do this every single week. We're talking about the issues that directly affect marginalized communities and our everyday lives. So subscribe to our podcast if you can. Support it on patreon.com and others of the like. Tiffany already went through a couple of organizations, so I'm not going to repeat that, but there is stuff that we can do. Stay informed, stay educated, stay empowered. On that note, I want to thank all of you guys and give yourselves a round of applause here at Envision Fest. I want to also thank the coordinators of Envision for allowing us to do our live podcast here. We appreciate it. And guys, also subscribe to Envision Fest too. This is an organization that supports, empowers women of color on different levels. So the work is being done. We just need to support them so that they can continue to do that type of work. Thank you, guys.
Riding around
Don't be shaking me up and it's making my heart break. You make my earthquake. Oh, you make my earthquake.
Thank you guys. Let's hear it for Stanley, Selena, and Tiffany. Be Heard Radio. You're live at Envision Fest, powered by the Brooklyn Circus. The Brooklyn Circus for sure. Made sure that we brought Be Heard and Selena Hill. Linda, shout out. She's somewhere in the house. You ladies are beautiful. And thank you guys again. Stick around. We have some more things going on. We have a dance clip.